we're idiots. Like, what were we doing? That was insane to do that. My name's James Hinchcliffe. I currently live in Indianapolis, and after 11 years of racing IndyCar, I stepped back from the car, and now I am a commentator for NBC on the IndyCar broadcasts, as well as doing some Formula One for F1 TV. For me, one of my kind of most epic racing stories actually comes from, if you followed IndyCar and you followed during the time I was driving, you'll probably remember this race. It was the Texas Motor Speedway race back in 2016. And it was an interesting race because we started the race at the normal time on the normal day in June, and 70 laps into the race, we had really bad thunderstorms come in. We had to red flag the race. And normally IndyCar does everything they can to get, the race in, whether it's later that day or we sometimes have to delay and run it the following day. But we looked at the radar and the rain wasn't stopping that day. And it was going to rain all the following day and all the next Tuesday. And we had a race the following weekend. So for the first time in history, IndyCar red flagged a race on a Sunday and came back like 2.5 months later to finish the race. So we were leading at the time of the red flag, and something, it had never been done before, showing up to the track like that. IndyCar had taken pictures of everybody's downforce configuration. They wanted you to try to come back with exactly the same car, exactly the same setup. We got 10 minutes to do a quick systems check and warm up, check ride heights, things like that. But you weren't even allowed to touch the car really afterwards. It was just to get 10 minutes on the track before you went 220 miles an hour into turn one in a pack, racing around Texas, which is, notoriously a kind of dangerous and scary oval. So we get the race going, and it was going awesome for us. We were leading pretty comfortably. I think we lapped up to fourth or third place even. And then there was a series of cautions late in the race that set up probably the coolest 10 laps of my racing career. And, Texas back in those days when people had new tires for a couple laps, it was like a good old fashioned flat out pack race. And I was so frustrated because we had dominated the race. On a long run, we were so much faster, but on a short run with new tires, everybody's car was pretty good. And so we had a lot of competition there. On one of the late yellows, most of the guys stopped for new tires. We decided to not give up the track position, and we stayed out on old tires. So the race went green with 10 laps to go. And I did not lift off the throttle for 10 consecutive laps. And it was an absolutely incredible battle with Tony Kanaan, who's a champion. He's won plenty of those races over the years. Indy 500 winner, Graham Rahal, Simon Pagenaud came and played for a little bit. But it was so tough. When you're in a pack race like that on an oval, the guy up front is essentially the slowest guy in the field because he's the one that's punching the hole and everyone's getting some kind of benefit from him. And so for 10 laps, I was having to try to keep 2 cars behind me. And I was doing it by trying to control where they put their cars. I wanted to not only drive my car, I wanted to drive the other 2 cars as well. And what I was doing was Tony Khan was on the low side, Graham was on the high side. So they'd split me on the straightaway. We'd go 3 wide into the corner, and then the guy in the car on the bottom's a little bit too tight. He's got to scrub too much speed to keep it pinned down there. The guy up top, he's got a little bit too much distance to cover. The middle lane is actually a great place to be, except for the fact it's the sketchiest place to be because you've got nowhere to go if something goes wrong. So out of a lot of the corners, I'd get a good run. I'd have the lead. And what I would do is I would put my car right in the middle of both of their cars. So neither car had a full draft off me. They both had half a draft. Now, it was enough for both of them to come up and split me going into the corner. We'd go 3 wide through the corner and then back and forth. And we sort of kept this yo-yo going. And then coming to the white flag, the whole thing, the only reason it worked for me was I had Graham and TK always running side by side. Nobody was able to get clear of the other one, so that way they could run into my full draft. And I would make sure if one guy was pulling ahead a little bit, I'd move and give the other guy a little bit more help to bring him back even. I mean, the amount that I was having to drive looking backwards as much as forwards was crazy. And I had an incredible spotter that was helping me do the whole thing. So on the last lap, Graham was actually lined up behind me as we crossed the line to take the yellow. And back in those days, the Indy cars had those big, ugly rear bumpers. And he misjudged a little bit, and he actually ran into the back of my car. And what that did is it launched me so far forward that not only was I so far forward, it let him clear Kanaan. The kind of shake and bake, work together tandem draft pushed us both so far forward that he was able to clear Kanaan, and he got a full draft on me coming out of turn 2 down the back straight on the final lap. And with that run, he just had so much momentum. And I tried to come back. He beat me to the line by 8/1000ths of a second. And it was heartbreaking, to be honest. I mean, I hate to tell an epic story where we came out the loser, but if you go back and watch that last 10 laps, it's one of the most thrilling, exciting bits of motorsport I've ever seen, whether I was in it or not. And it's one of those things, you look back on it now and you think, we're idiots. Like, what were we doing? That was insane to do that. But in the moment, you weren't going to lift. You were bouncing off other guys mid-corner. It was as sketchy as it gets, but it truly was epic. He had so much more speed coming off of 2. He actually completely cleared me going into 3. So I got back in his draft, and we were coming back at him. If the start-finish line was 50 feet further down the racetrack, we'd have won that race. If it had been a lap sooner or a lap longer, we would have won that race. It was just the way it all happened. So knowing that we dominated, we had led the 180-something laps that day, to come up second place by such a small amount was so heartbreaking. But, it was still a great race. It was still a drive I'm proud of. And, it was a cool thing to be a part of. Yeah, Texas is a pretty unique place in an IndyCar. It's almost the same speeds as Indianapolis, but it's a mile shorter. There's a mile less racetrack. So, it's considerably more stressful in a lot of ways. Because of the higher banking, you get a lot more side-by-side racing, which, of course, is a little tenser. I think you could safely say it was the most risky track, most dangerous track that we went to. But in a lot of ways, it was also a lot of fun because of that. It was a kind of unique style of racing in an Indy car. And you go back through the archives all the way back to the mid-90s when they started going there. It put on some awesome races over the years. But it was definitely one of the ones you kind of circled on your calendar every January. Like, all right, gotta buckle up for Texas. Normally the car is set up so if you're out front in clean air, it's relatively easy to hold flat. That's changed a bit. They restructured and reconfigured the track back in 2017, and that made it a little bit more difficult just in general. But normally now, even still, if you're out front in clean air, you got a lot of downforce on, you can run pretty flat out. But as soon as you get in traffic, you're running in dirty air, the car moves around a ton, you lose a lot of downforce in dirty air, and it starts sliding, which at those speeds is terrifying.